this demonstration we'll take the pen and ink strokes and mark making techniques that we've learned so far, which are hatching, cross-hatching, and stippling, and then apply them to a realistic image. Here I have an image of a person's eye, and the first thing that I've done is I've just drawn it out in pencil. Notice that there's not really any shading involved here. I've just indicated where my areas of value are, and then just kind of the contour outline, so to speak, of the shape. So I've checked my proportions, they look okay, and now I'm ready to get going. Instead of shading with pencil, we're going to shade with pen and ink. And it's important to put this away from your dominant hand. I'm left-handed, so I wouldn't want to set it right here where I could knock it over, because it is permanent. It sustains clothes and people's drawings. So I'm going to keep it over here, and hopefully nothing will happen. I'm going to dip my pen nib here into the ink well till up to about right here, right past the little hole, which is the well that holds the ink. So I'll dip that. I don't want to dip it all the way up here because then it'll start getting on my hands and all over my project. I'm going to just gently rub the bottom of the ink well against the top of my canister to remove any excess ink and to discourage splatters going all over my paper. The first thing that I'm going to do is define my dark areas. So I'm going to start with my pupil here, and I'm just kind of creating this outline. Then I'll begin to work inside it, and I'll begin to build up value with hatching lines. And again, those are lines that go in one direction. To build up intense value, or intense darks, you'll repeat this process of creating parallel lines, but you'll just create parallel lines over one another. So a set of two or more parallel lines that cross are called cross-hatching. So I want to build this value up a little bit darker. Just going to kind of I'm not going to bring in as much detail to the eye, just for the sake of time in this demonstration. I would if I was spending longer on this project. We'll just kind of start to indicate that detail. It's lighter there, darker here. I like to build up value gradually with pen and ink because, unlike pencil, it's only an additive medium. So in other words, you can't subtract it, you can't erase. Once it's there, it's there. So before I create really dark values, I want to make sure that my proportions are correct and those values are indeed as dark as I am making them out to be. I could also do stippling for this, which is just creating tiny dots. I'll show you how to do that in a moment. And I'll come back and make this darker later. But with any kind of drawing, I learned to build up value kind of in all parts of the image before I move on, and that eliminates like what I was just talking about, getting areas too dark. Now, if this starts to happen on your pen, sometimes the paper gets kind of balled up in there. I can just pick it off with my finger and then wipe that off. So I'm going to create some dark values here. I know that there's dark values up here. And you want to be checking too, especially when you're drawing people. That eyelid's a little bit too big. There we go. Especially when you're drawing people who have skin, you want to make sure that you're not just drawing hard lines for everything, because a lot of places are kind of the values gradually built up through soft lines, and sometimes stippling, or that tiny mark making through little dots, although it's tedious, can build up values, because you can't blend pen and ink like you can with pencil. There's no pen and ink blending stub. Instead, you kind of got to get creative. And there are other ways to do that too. You can do hatching lines. Instead of dots, you can do kind of little scribbles if you want to, like this. It's up to you, but that small and tedious mark making is called stippling. So in this case, it might be good to build up value gradually around the edge of this eye. Someone recently asked me about the pencil lines with pen and ink, and you want to make sure that you can erase those, but you want to make sure that the ink is completely dry so that you don't smudge all of your hard work. Another kind of non-destructive technique to practice with pen and ink is if you are well on your way to creating an awesome finished drawing and you have one part done, you're only working on a certain part, you would want to cover that area with a cover sheet. So let's say I was done with this area up here, I would cover it with a cover sheet so that if I spilled or splattered my ink, it wouldn't get on my piece. It would get on the cover paper. Alright, so just kind of building up values here. I'll come back to that a little bit later. Pen and ink is a little bit, like I said, more tedious than some other materials, but it is worth it. I'm noticing that this needs to be a little bit darker. That's why I like building values up, or areas of the piece up together, instead of just completely finishing one before moving on to the other, because it's helpful for your brain to compare values in one part of a piece to your other parts of the piece. You just kind of get more of an accurate read that way. There we go. It's looking a little bit better. I notice here that this part of the eyelid is covered by eyelashes, so it is a little bit darker. I'm just going to kind of add some hatching lines there before I add in the eyelashes. I know that my eyelashes are in front of my eyelid. Add some hatching lines there too, or cross-hatching rather. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. Just kind of building up value behind and then working from back to front, adding some value here because I noticed that that part of the eye is shadowed a little bit more. That shadowing comes down here. Doing this gradually. There's some shadow here. And those lines will look less severe once I add in more detail. The eye is rounded, so that's why in pictures and in sight we see shading or shadowing on one side or the other. Alright, so I've added that in. Now I'm going to begin to add, I'm going to do it a little bit more. So whenever I want to add a darker value to my hatching lines, I'll create cross-hatching lines. Cross-hatching lines don't need to be straight. They can be curved like they are here. With hatching and cross-hatching, it becomes a little bit more realistic when you follow the contour lines of the skin and the bone structure. So for example, this kind of goes up. I'm going to indicate that in my drawing. Now I'll begin to add the eyelashes, kind of in clumps. This woman did a good job or a thorough job of applying mascara, so her eyelashes are a little bit more prominent than ones that would be a little bit more natural. The eyelashes are usually the longest on the outside, or they appear the longest on the outside. And I can get a little bit thinner, oops, up here. I'm never forcing my pen. I'm kind of going with the direction of the pen. I'm pulling it. I'm never pushing it. If I push it, I usually get ink splatters. Just kind of darkening as I go. Maybe I would want to come in here and then add a little bit more detail into this, a little bit more darkness. If you make a mistake, if you didn't leave area of white, we also have white ink too. You can use that to cover mistakes or just add areas of highlight that got lost in your drawing. I'm going to add thin hatching lines, as well as some eyelashes down here after I add hatching lines and after I get that piece of paper off of my pen. So adding that shading. I'm not adding the eyelashes yet. I'm going to add a little bit of cross-hatching down here because it's a little bit darker. And then I'll begin to add those eyelashes. And since those eyelashes are kind of on top of everything, I'm waiting to add those for last. So I do kind of work from background to foreground. Background being the skin. Oops, I want to avoid that. That happened because I didn't brush off the tip, the underside rather, of my quill pen on my inkwell. I'll do some stippling. I didn't include stippling as much as I normally would in this demonstration just for the sake of time, but it is just a nice kind of even and predictable way to build up shading, unlike the cross-hatching that I'm doing. Cross-hatching oftentimes kind of gives off like a bold approach, bold strokes, dynamic, dramatic, and if that's the look you're going for, awesome. And if it's not, if you're somebody who likes control and doesn't mind working a little bit more slowly, stippling may be the way to go. Let's see here. Adding. If I want to make thin lines, make sure to press a little bit lighter. And if I'm just dipping my pen in the inkwell, brushing it off pretty good to remove any kind of excess ink. All right, and then build that up. This needs to be built up a little bit more. The key to having kind of a dynamic looking image is to have a full range of values. So in many different parts of your piece, have you developed dark darks, that range of midtones that is sometimes challenging to create with pen and ink. And then those light, have you left the highlights? Sometimes that's the hardest part, is leaving the light areas well enough alone, because, like I said, there is not really a lot of subtractive methods that will go well with pen and ink. So with eyebrow, I'm paying attention to the shape, the length, and the direction of the eyebrow hairs. And by varying those, I'll make it look more realistic than if I just kind of thought in my mind, okay, well, what does an eyebrow look like? You really want to pay attention to the nuances if you're working from a photograph, and try and free your mind of what you think you see and focus on what you actually see. So not thinking, okay, I know an eyebrow should look like this, and then draw it out. Really paying attention to what it actually looks like in the photograph, breaking different features that you usually don't think about up into smaller parts and really analyzing them and then trying to draw them realistically. So this, then I realized once I added the eyebrow, I know the eyebrow needs to be, a little bit darker, which is because I'm hurrying. Again, let that be a lesson to you to brush off your inkwell to avoid disaster. I'll let that dry and then scrape it off. Figure out where these darker parts are. And there we go.